Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this webinar kindly hosted by Marqeta. Today we will turn our eyes to the north and have a look at across the societies in the Nordics. But before we dive into the interesting presentations and hopefully interesting panel discussions that we have ahead of us, allow me to introduce to you the Nordic region and tell you a bit about how financial services have evolved, the digitization agenda, and of course the cashless societies, or increasingly cashless societies that we here live in. But first, a bit of a short geography lesson for those of you that are not quite up to date on where we are. As already said, we are in the very north of Europe. The Nordics consist of a group of countries, and today we'll focus on three, which are the Scandinavian countries, Denmark, Sweden, and Norway. Denmark and Norway are both around, well over 5 million inhabitants, both growing on 6 million, whereas Sweden is the bigger brother in the company with, a little over 10 million inhabitants. So we are small, nimble countries. We pride ourselves with a high degree of trust, a trust between people, a trust between or towards the governments in general, something that we have also seen in these strange and difficult times that we've all been through, that the collaboration and understanding between the different entities in society, inhabitants, organizations, companies, and the governments have been working extremely well. Also in a period of time where we've all been tested on what can be done digitally. I think it's safe to say that all of the Nordic countries were extremely well prepared for such a situation, as we had already digitized basically all services and also a lot of public services. This is also thanks to very ambitious digitization agendas across the different countries and different governments. In the Nordic countries, we all have very strong digital ID solutions for both personal use and also for companies, which again have made a lot of things simpler during the COVID times, applying for all of the different benefits that companies could apply for, filing various registrations and all of that. Finally, it's worth highlighting the collaboration culture that characterizes the Nordic countries. I think it's a result of being small countries. We know that we have to get together to create results, and that has led to a lot of strong partnerships, not just across companies, but also between private companies and the public sector. And in the financial services space, we have in all countries strong history for collaboration across the banks, which again has driven paved the way for early introduction of digital financial services and created a great uptake of that. The result of all of these efforts have put the Nordic countries firmly in the lead of for instance, the EU's Digital Society Index, where you have Finland, Sweden, and Denmark on places 1, 2, and 3. Norway is, of course, not part of that, as Norway is not an EU country. But also looking at other indexes like the UN e-Government Index, you have Denmark as number 1, and you have Finland and Sweden also in the top 5. So all of this have really paved the way for the digital financial services that we'll be talking about today. When you talk about digital financial services and uptake, we often, especially when we're outside of the Nordics to discuss these topics, are faced with the question of generational issues. Is digital financial services just for the younger and the middle-aged? But across the Nordics, you see a very high degree of use of digital financial services. Across the population, you have well over 90% use of online and mobile banking, and that also applies to the elderly segment, where you see close to 90% in the 75 to 80-year-old group. when you look across all age groups, the use of online and mobile banking is far higher than the use of, for instance, Facebook. So I think that's quite telling for the Nordic countries. When it comes to mobile financial services, all of the countries have, or especially the three Scandinavian countries, have all seen the emergence of strong local champions in mobile payments. In Denmark, we have mobile pay, in Norway, Vips, and in Sweden, we have Swish. And all of these are very much a part of our day-to-day life. And I think that has to do with the cashlessness that we will also discuss today. Because introducing person-to-person mobile payments really solved a pain point for us, because whenever we had to pay a friend for beer or pizza, or have to contribute to school gathering at our kids' schools or anything, we always had to get a bank account number, log into our mobile banking, and do the transfer there, because none of us were carrying cash. Personally, I haven't carried cash in Denmark for more than 5 years now, and living a perfectly cashless life here. And I think that also applies to most of my co-panelists today. And the cashlessness is really something that has become high on the agenda. Surprisingly, not so much in the Nordic countries as outside of the Nordic countries when they look at the Nordic countries, because even though we are practically cashless societies, it's not a result of a cashless ambition from the governments, but rather a result of the whole digitalization agenda from the governments that have led to that cash. It hasn't been banned, or it hasn't been put in bad standing in any ways. It's simply not just the better alternative. So it's more a result of digitization than a goal in itself. That also means that services like ATMs are rarely used across the Nordic countries, and more of the ATMs are being taken down due to very low usage. That said, we still have a lot of cash in quote unquote in circulation, but the truth is that it's not really being circulated. It's high denomination notes, and they are kept at very few individuals. We can of course go down that rabbit hole and discuss what is the cash actually used for, but I think we'll save that discussion for later. So one thing before heading over to introduce the first speaker today, I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Christian Sorensen. I'm a founder of Norfico, a consultancy based in Copenhagen. I've been working with financial services, digital financial services, for the past 20 years, and now working across Europe, across the globe, and across the Nordics with a lot of different interesting players. But enough about me and enough about the high level. Let's get into the actual content of today. I'm very proud to introduce our first speaker. So with me from Norway, we have a financial ninja. We have Sunny Christine Jacobsen, who is the CEO and founder of BillKill. So over to you, Sunny, and your presentation.
Thank you, Christian, for the introduction. Hi guys, thanks for having me here today. My name is Sunny Christine, and I'm CEO and founder at BillKill. I'm based in Oslo, Norway, and I'm looking forward to share what we do here at BillKill. My background is organizational psychology and master degree in business strategy and innovation. I spent my whole career in bank and finance industry, where I specific work with debt, credit, invoicing, and product development in almost like 15 years now. During these years, I learned that it does not take much to avoid unnecessary reminder fees on debt collection cases. The vast majority can afford to pay their bills, and it was often a matter of not knowing the consequences of an unpaid bill, or that invoice payment was not a priority. Many also did not know their opportunities or rights when they faced financial difficulties. Basically, it was lots about lack of motivation and knowledge. I knew that we could do something about it and believe that with simple steps, we could help motivate more people to pay by the due date and avoid unnecessary fees. BillKill is a consumer-focused fintech app and gives consumer automatically an easy overview of current bills and combines with efficient payment tools with reward programs. And for the sake of the limited time, I will not go into the technicality of BillKill today. In BillKill, we have two focus areas. The first one is to digitalize consumer rights and the opportunities that require manual work today, such as to request of the deferral of payment or an installment agreement, submit an objection for having received an invoice that you believe that you are not the legal owner, since the project was not as expected or the service you order is not delivered by agreement. So we have already written the request for the user, and the user only needs to make a decision. By taking an action and being in dialogue with the invoice center, the user can avoid reminder fees and debt collection cases. And users save time and money when it's easy to manage the bills. And with BillKill, the user does not need a master's degree in finance or legal assistant to implement small measures. All features are digitalized and user doesn't have to change platform to manage the bills here. And the second thing that we have a focus on is to motivate the consumer to pay by the due date. Our goal is to make our users look forward to settling. And it may sound crazy that someone will look forward to paying a bill, but it looks like we are on the right track now. Our analysis shows that 96.5% of all invoices registered in BillKill are paid by the due date in BillKill. And one of the bigger benefits that motivates our users is to earn points for paying by due date when they use cards like Amex and MasterCard with reward programs. And Amex, for example, gives points for all the transactions in BillKill to help to motivate more people to pay by the due date. The average consumer spend over 60% of their income on invoice payment every single month, and most financial institutions today benefit from consumers paying late. And today you earn points and incentives when you shop online or spending money in a store. However, there is no platform that motivates you or gives you rewards for paying your invoices because it's your responsibility and no one else's. And the motivation to make sure to pay by the due date has been generally low among consumers and is often not prioritized even though they have money to pay with the bills. In BillKill, for each invoice user pay in our platform, she can earn points that allows them to be one step closer to travel for free, for example, like companion tickets, or travel more comfortable by upgrading to business or first class by using points like Eurobonus and miles for the next trip without doing anything extra than what they are used to do anyway, like paying the bills. And we work to help our users document good payment habits in the future. I have a belief that documentation of payment habits will play a great role in credit assessment in the future. Today, credit scoring is based on last year's income, wealth, number of children, geographical area, and etc. But you can have high income and wealth and still be a lousy payer. And at the same time, you can have lower income and no wealth, but always pay by the due date and is a good payer. To be able to show that you prioritize your payment obligations over a longer period of time, like 1 to 3 years combined with income, will give the consumer a better credit score and more fair financial opportunities. The service providers are also given the opportunity to give more correct assessments of new consumers as well. We learned a lot from analyzing user behavior, not only from the size of user invoices or size of the transactions. We see that the user behavior within payment has changed a lot comparing to just a couple of years ago. And one of the changes that we experience is that consumers demand the payment to be more quickly, more flexible and easier, almost so that they do not notice that they are paying or following our payment procedure. They only want to make a decision to pay. Thanks for listening, everyone, and I'm looking forward to the questions now.
Thank you so much, Sunny, for that very, very interesting presentation. I, for one, think you're onto something extremely interesting, saying that you basically have taken something that has existed for years and years, and then basically rethinking the consumer experience when it comes to bill payments. I really appreciate that. I have a lot of questions for you, and by the way, if anybody from the audience would like to ask any questions, please use the Q&A section in the event page, and I will be picking up the questions that you may have for our speakers and bring them into these Q&As. But I would like to start by, I was talking about the digitization culture and history in the Nordics. Do you see your service as a result of that digitization journey?
I wouldn't say that it's only like BillKill is the cause of the digital changes here, because we do have other fintech services that contribute to the changes. And I believe that it's kind of combination of like generation shift and of the consumer behavior here at the Nordic. And there are still continents where the payment habits has not been changed remarkably, even though there are general shifts in this world. But in Nordics regions, we are known for adopting the payment and the newer digital payments faster than average countries in the world. And I also think that also the digitization of cash used in the Nordic regions works well here. We cannot take it for granted that it will work as the same way in other countries. And however, knowledge, learning, and digital education in the financial field should be available free for charge to everyone in all countries. And in this way, we are one step closer to reducing financial class divisions.
When you talk about generations, is that are you talking about generations in the society, so an age thing, or are we talking generations more of the new technical generation or mental generation? So we see generational shifts in the services rather than just the generational shift in society, if that makes sense.
Yeah, you're right. We can categorize that. And I mean, by the age, we see that the trend shows that cash is disappearing more and more in everyday life. But at the same time, the consumers are getting access to better digital tools and features that makes it easier to keep an overview of consumption, bank accounts, and control of their own personal finances. And through digital tools, we provide a financial education that includes like budget, savings, investment, and consumption at an earlier learning stage than what we are used to with cash. And I would also argue that it provides simpler and understandable knowledge than it has been in the past. Knowledge in the financial field is now more generalized and in a more everyday language and simplified so that everyone, regardless of social or educational background, can have access to the same information and learning. Before the cash, learning was more related to parents' finances and household. For example, our generation that has grown up with the cash and then went through the digital shift, it is more difficult to win off cash thinking than the next generation that is born right into the digital world. And although some of us learned personal finances from home, most of us did not practicing it until we made our own money and had to pay our own bills. And today's generation has opportunities where they can practice consumption through digital tools, better overview, and have access to their money easier at an earlier age than what we had when we grew up. They also have access to broader learning as well and variety.
Yeah, I mean, just looking at being the father of a son who's now in his early 20s, but when he was growing up, he had a much better understanding of financial services through all of the online games and financial systems and the value of different currencies in these virtual landscapes. So he probably learned more about financial services through World of Warcraft than I'd been able to teach him, even though I was working in a bank when he was when he was a child. But a question about this new generation: do you see that these digital tools will they be a prerequisite for this financial education that this next generation will need?
Yes, I think that it will absolutely contribute. Expectation with the payment among consumers today have already changed there and are still changing. And your entire personal finances are more accessible to you through apps and other digital platforms. And you can also have your finances and consumption and financial behavior analyzed for you today. And the other thing that next generation will experience is that, we already require and expecting faster feedback on total overview, simpler features, and preferable digital tools that do the work for us today. And trend shows that the consumer only wants to decide and not do the actual work. And another thing worth mentioning is that credit and buy now, pay later has been normalized today. And it provides easier access to money and consumption that is not always necessary or beneficial to consumers. And the threshold for spending money on something you cannot really afford has been lowered, especially for our generation who grew up with cash. And I think the next generation will have they will be more educated. They will have different kinds of behavior than what today's generation have. And there should be stricter requirements for information to those who offer buy now and pay later, so that consumers understand the consequences more clearly on how it will affect their finances in the future.
Yeah, so that we do not end in a buy now, worry later situation.
Yeah.
Do you think that the rest of the world should they look towards the Nordics as setting the example, or are we basically the lab rats trying out the full consequences of hyper digitization and with the risk of alienation towards financial health?
I think in the future, I believe the financial education will be more accessible, like I said, to everyone at an earlier age than before. And it also means that children will learn about credit and debit payment much earlier than what we did, and at least the consequences of the consumption. And what we do here in Nordic is not always an answer to what the rest of the world should do. For example, our culture and consumer habits and bank and finance infrastructures plays a major role when it comes to payments. And however, as the Nordic countries are often further ahead and adopt new services faster than the world average, there are lots of learning in our mistakes and successes that can contribute to better processes and payments in countries in question, I think.
I think that was very wise words, and thank you, Sunny, so much. And you will stick around for the panel session later. So if any of you come up with additional questions for Sunny, that then we can please type them into the Q&A box, and we will pick them up for the panel. So thanks again to Sunny, and we will be moving from Oslo to Stockholm, where we have the privilege of having a speaker from one of the prominent neobanks in the region, Northmill Bank, where we have Helen Björk, who will introduce herself and the bank that she worked for, and yeah, give her presentation. So over to Stockholm and to Helen.
So thank you so much for having me here. My name is Helen Björk, and I'm the product manager for Northmill's payments team. So I'm going to take you through this presentation today and tell you more around what choices we have made when it comes to payments. So I'm not sure how many of you have heard of Northmill so far. We are founded all the way back in 2006, so we're not one of the newest players, but we are still here, and we already have 200,000 customers that we are serving with products. We are very customer-centric at Northmill, and our biggest achievement here is that we are highest rated on Trustpilot with 4.8 at the average score. And this is something that will always be important for us to keep close to the customers so that they actually want to use us and be in touch with us, both in customer center, but also in apps and web, so that we're not losing the customers on the way. Northmill got our banking license back in 2019. So we're coming close now to a 2-year anniversary in celebrating this, which will be really exciting. Looking back where we were 2 years ago, we've been able to do so much more with the banking license and really leveraging our product offering. And we're just in the beginning of utilizing this and offering our customers even more. So today, we're offering products within savings, insurances, credits, and of course, payments. And payments are what you are all here to listen into. So I'm going to dig a bit deeper into what we're doing in payments. So Northmill are 15 years in, but we're just about to launch a card, which is really interesting because if you look at the other neobanks out there, especially in the UK, everyone has started out with a card. So why are we not doing it that way around? I can really understand why you would start out with a card, and there's a lot of success factors here, and they've done really, really well. But then there comes the stage where everyone is in now, is how you turn it into profit. But just looking into why they're in payments to start out with, transactions are gold. I mean, everyone understands that offering payments is a door into all of that data and knowledge about your customers that you don't have before. Just knowing that your customers are commuting to work, they have a dog, or they're buying takeout for lunch will really help you in segmenting your customers and offering them more products and better products to really have a better experience within your bank. Also, this is a great branding opportunity. If we compare the customer segment between credits and payments, not everyone are needing a credit, not everyone can get a credit, but payments everyone can do. So the customer group here is much, much larger, and you'll be able to leverage your offering a lot faster. And with that said, everyone needs to pay. Like, there's no one out there that doesn't need to pay today. Regardless of if it's cash, card, you still need a bank behind you to be able to make these payments. And finally, ease of scale. If we're looking at scaling with other products such as credit or savings, there's so much regulation out there that won't enable you to go as fast as with payments, because payments have this amazing infrastructure together with Visa and MasterCard, where you will be able to make payments anywhere in the world. So just tweaking your product in different markets will then enable you to be everywhere at once. But we're not doing it that way, right? We're 15 years in, and this fall we are offering a new card. And for us, it's always been a matter of growing organically. We want to grow with a profit so that we can be here for our customers in long term. And that is one of the results in why we have a banking license today. So it's really been about timing. Why should we enter payments? What will that bring to Northmill as a business, but also to our customers? Do they need payments, and what do they want us to do with that? So it really needs to bring something to us long term. So this has been really interesting, and now we feel like we are at this point where we are ready to have payments in our product offering, and it will become an acquisition product, a way in to become a Northmill customer and to be a part of our full ecosystem so that you can take part of all of our product offerings. But payments will be the foundation for that. And it's to help them with their financial decisions, give them a good overview. So there's so much here that we could be doing with our customers that we are looking forward to, so we can help them. But if we're looking into the future here, we've set that payments will be an enabler for us, and this is the foundation for us going forward now when we have a profitable business. It's really exciting to look where we were just 1 year ago. 1 year ago, I had my first meeting with Marqeta. We knew that we wanted to scale fast, both in Sweden, but also in other European countries. And we knew that we wanted to be in the driver's seat. As a neobank, you don't want to be tied back. You want to be in charge of your own development. So it's really, really important that you have a partner that supports you. And I just remember giving the documentation to my developers here, and it was pretty obvious who they preferred of everyone that we were looking into. And it's fun to see that when we started development here in December, today we actually have a card in our hand and it's working in stores. And that feeling is really cool, to be on that full journey and seeing that you can create a payments ecosystem from the scratch. And we also have our app out there where we're learning how our customers want to use app, and also use our web page to get a good overview and use payments. So we're excited to get feedback here in the upcoming months, and we are planning to launch this product in the fall. So that will be really exciting. But for us, I mean, like I said before, 1 year ago, we knew some about payments, but not all. Now we're a year in. We have a payments product, but we're still not payment experts. And like I see, there's not a need for us to become payment experts because we have partners around us that can help us with that. And instead, as a neobank, it's more important to focus on the customer and what the customer actually wants, and always remembering that they are the ones that are driving your business. And instead, we can focus on really building this great banking experience. And these are the things that I think everyone has understood that will set the neobanks apart. How are you actually doing these things for your customers? And if you do it in a good way, those are the ones that will be the winners. But when I speak to customers, it's really interesting to see that no one is asking about cool features, right? Unless you're a payments freak, like probably a lot of us. The things that they actually say is that it just needs to be working, regardless of if it's in-store, if it's online, if it's utilizing cash. The payments that you want to do just need to work. And it's not a matter really of not being happy if it works, but more that you will be really unhappy if it doesn't work. So having this foundation of really making payments work is something that you need to have before you can continue on and building everything around it for your great banking experience. And another part also that we feel is really important is that there can't be any limitations. We as a bank, we're not here to tell our customers what they can and cannot do. If they want to utilize cash, they should be able to utilize cash, even if we're in a cashless society. But most people will be paying with the card, and that's why we have a great card with a good experience that goes around it. So with that said, really, it's really interesting to see what we have been doing in 1 year. And it's going to be super interesting to see what's coming up in the next few years. I think that the ones that are able to give back to their customers in form of advice, tips, and everything that you've learned from transactions, those will be the ones that are truly going to be the winners. So hopefully that will be us. We'll see. And hopefully you also see our card out there in the market, also in Europe in no time. So thank you a lot for listening, and let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you so much for that interesting presentation, Helen, and congratulations on the results that you've accomplished so far. In your presentation, you do talk a lot about the importance of payments, and you also mentioned that payments seem to be one of the major focus points for most challenger and neobanks. Is that a result of the incumbent banks having neglected payments for the past decades?
I wouldn't say that they have neglected payments, really. I mean, the incumbents have done a great job in the Nordics, and they've been driving the innovation toward becoming more cashless and driving things like Swish, for example, which is driven by the big banks. But then it's difficult because payments itself is never going to drive itself as a standalone business. You have to have everything around it so that you can really have a good service toward your customer. And they focus more on mortgages and these things that are around, which has left room for other players like the neobanks to come in and build the foundation with payments and then offer other products on top, like more innovative experiences within their apps.
Mm-hmm. But I guess one of the reasons that the incumbent banks have focused more on investments and mortgages and such is because they are simply more commercially attractive for the banks. And you talk about making payments commercially viable as well. How do you think that you and other neobanks will succeed in making payments profitable?
Well, that's kind of where I think it will be really interesting to see what will happen here in the upcoming years. Payments itself is a high volume product. There is cost around each payment. And I think it's going to be really hard to have payments as a core that will be profitable. And that's why for us at Northmill, it's really important to have products around to support our growth within payments. But payments itself will never be the core for us to become profitable. That's what we already have today in our banking offer. But to be able to be more relevant toward our customers and be there in a day-to-day experience, that's where we need payments to kind of broaden our offering.
So if you then try to follow the revenue streams of the incumbent banks, and apologies for the provocative questions, but where's the challenge then? What are you as a challenger bank really challenging them if you want to make money the same way that the traditional banks make their money?
Well, I think it's really interesting because we haven't seen the neobanks make revenue yet, so we don't know if their way will work. We're trying to do the way that the incumbents are, but we want to kind of cherry pick, right? So they're doing some things really well, which is the business model. They have a good experience with their customers when it comes more to face-to-face, having true customer service that will help the customers on phone and in different branches. And we want to keep that relationship with having really good customer service within Northmill. So you can call us if you need help from a real human. So we want to keep those parts, but then we want to bring those parts that the neobanks do really good, which is more of the experience within the app and really creating a relevant and personalized experience toward the customers. And this is where we think that the incumbents will lack. They have legacy systems and won't be able to drive their innovation as fast as we will be able to do. So it's really interesting more for us to look into what type of other players are out there that are really good at personalization and building this experience toward the customers, like all of the apps like TikTok, Spotify, Instagram. These are building a true relevant experience that are personalized toward the customer. And being able to do that within banking, it will be really hard, but payments will be a good layer to become one of those players later on.
Yeah. Do you have any of those features or services from either in your own pipeline or when you look at these different apps that you mentioned? Do you have some favorite services or ways of doing things that you think will be vital for financial services success in the future?
Well, I think this is where the user experience becomes really important because customers are becoming really used to using their apps in social media in one way, and using that much time within these apps will then come over to banking where you want them to work in the same type of way. So it doesn't mean that we're going to have a bunch of cool feature that looks like a social media stream just around the corner, but it means more that when you're swiping and clicking things, it needs to act in the same type of way. So more working within the UI and the UX space.
Yeah, but we'll probably not get to the point where I start liking and giving thumbs up to my bills and invoices. But let's see. But maybe we can, with Sonny's help, get that the actual issue of that invoice will instead giving me a thumbs up for actually paying on time. Of the services that you look into, do you see some of these that are that could be seen as Nordic? Do we as a region bring something special to the table service-wise that the rest of the world could learn from?
Well, I think the Nordics are still within a shift where the neobanks are not taking over the incumbents' customers. We're more a complement still. And looking into the UK, the neobanks are starting to take over the incumbents' customers. So it's really hard to say who's driving what here. I mean, we're good at innovation and have the stability from the bank's founding Swish back in 2012 and having Bank ID for a long time, where we are all used to identify ourselves digitally. But then I think that they still are driving the innovation in other ways, especially if you look into other markets as China, which are doing even more than we are already.
Okay. Thank you so much, Helen, for your presentation and for great answers to the questions. And again, if anybody from the audience have additional questions, please fill them into the Q&A section and we will pick them up in the panel session later. We will now go from Stockholm to Copenhagen and have a presentation from Stefan Christensen, who is the head of payment at Pleo. Pleo is a fintech, very successful fintech out of Copenhagen and recently crowned unicorn. So over to Stefan and his presentation.
Hi everyone, I'm Stefan. I'm head of payments here in Pleo, and I've been with Pleo for the last 2 years. And today I'm going to give you a sneak peek into what we've been up to here in Pleo, both historically, but also what is it that we are focusing on going forward, and how is it that we really think about payments. To really understand this, we actually want to start by taking a bit of a broader look out into the world and see what's happening around us. I think no matter where you look today, you'll hear people talking about that the COVID pandemic has accelerated a bunch of trends that we already saw. So e-commerce transactions are going up. We have the future of work movement that is becoming more and more apparent, which is all about people working remotely. It's all about how we actually organize as organizations. And in Pleo, we're particularly interested in this last trend around the future of work. So let me try and put a few more words to that. So historically, organizations, no matter if that's companies or NGOs or whatever it is, have been very centralized. So this is sort of like having one person at the center that then controls it all and say, this is what we're going to do. And then all the employees or members of the organization executes on that. And what we're seeing now is really a movement towards a more distributed way of organizing and working. So this is all about taking the employees of the organization and putting them at the center. So this move is really one that we feel quite dearly and deeply about here in Pleo. So let me try and explain a bit more what are some of the things that are changing. So first of all, I think we see that the culture is moving from being risk adverse into sort of really trusting your employees. We see that the leadership style is moving from being micromanaging to having empowered employees that can take the decisions within their field. We see that the decision making is really changing from top down into autonomous out by every single employees. And the whole view of what an employee is changing from being like a resource, a unit of production, into being a valued individual. And this sort of movement, it's out there. I think it's coming bit by bit. There are clear examples of it. And this is really how we fit in to the world in Pleo. Because in Pleo, in the last 6 years, we've come a long way. But at the core of what we do, it's all the same. We are really on a mission to make every single employee feel valued at work. And what does it really mean to be valued at work? It means a lot of things. It means that you can take the decisions within your area of expertise. It means that you can focus on the things that matters and not a bunch of overhead and administrative processes. It means that you can buy the things that you need to get your work done. And this last piece about the spending, that is really what we're focusing on in Pleo. So let me put a few more words on that. I think what we really see from our customers and the research we've done is that there's a lot of distrust in employees when it comes to spend. So employees don't understand why companies are willing to pay them a fat salary, but when they need to buy something for 500 kroner, they need to go and ask permission. They might even need to borrow the company money before they can go out and buy it, such that they pay out of pocket. And on the financial side, in the finance department, people have a bunch of administrative burdens in keeping track of receipts, keeping track of expenses, and all of this. So it's a hassle for everyone. And that is why we've decided to try and focus on this one as one part of this movement towards making everyone feel valued. So a bit more about our journey. So in Pleo, we started as what we call a superior company card, which was all about just like having a state-of-the-art card solution with limits, instant issuing, and all these things. And then we built great software on top. We then progressed and wanted to start handling what we call non-card-based expenses. So this is things like a mileage claim or a per diem if you're in Germany, for instance. And now what we're moving towards is becoming the go-to spending solution. So the solution that can cater for all types of spend a company has. And this is really what we're focusing on. Throughout this journey, we've had a few key principles or part like our DNA here in Pleo that really guides us. And the first one here is that the end users are the real decision makers. So here, what I want to emphasize is that normally when you sell a SaaS product, you have a decision maker that you try and sell to. In Pleo's case, it would be the finance department, the CFO. And we actually don't, or we care about them, but we care a bit more about the employees, because if they are using the solutions, then it will actually be the best thing. So that is what we always prioritize. Second piece of our DNA is that buying is just a means to an end. So we want to just be there no matter how you're purchasing, whichever type of payment or whichever type of device you do. And then the customer experience is everything. So every time we have a touch point, we want to delight our customers. It doesn't matter if it's when they open up their brand new card and see the packaging, or if they call into support. They need to have a great experience. And then the last piece is that we believe that problems are often best solved by changing the point of view. And this is why when you look at some of Pleo's features or solutions, they are quite deep in the experience, right? Like other companies and other solutions out there are a bit shallow, so they just get the work done, but it's not an end-to-end experience. And this is really what we want to offer our customers. So that is a bit about what's going on in the world around us and the journey we've been on here in Pleo. So let me try and explain a bit more our offering and how our payments capability really sits at the core of this one. So the Pleo offering most simply can be broken down into three pieces. What happens before a payment, what happens at the payment, and what happens post-payment or purchase. So if we start with what needs to happen before the payment or the purchase, this is all about getting your team set up, your solution set up in the right way. So it's like giving people the right limits and the right setup in their accounts. It's ensuring that you have everything linked into your bookkeeping system. Then there is the point of purchase. Here, it's all about making it as smooth and as easy as possible. So we just want to cater for all types of payments, whether that is like with virtual card, plastic cards, Apple Pay, or you name it. And then just as important is the piece that happens after the actual payment, where here we really try and automate all the processes for the finance department to make sure their life is easy. So this is why we, for instance, build out an automatic receipt fetching from people's emails, because then our finance department get all the things they need, and our employees don't need to bother like going in and finding and attaching the receipt. So it's a win-win. But really, to understand and leverage Pleo, it really we need to succeed across all of these pieces of the journey. So how do we actually do that? We do that by being three companies in one. So first of all, we're a software company. We have a very strong mobile app. We have a very strong web app with a state-of-the-art setup and solution. But we also need to be a very strong and good payments company, because if we cannot offer the right pieces at the moment of purchase, or if we cannot offer the right insights based on the payment data, we're not going to solve our problems. And last, we are a compliance company, because we want our customers to get on board easy. And that really requires us to be in control of our own risk appetite, which means we need to solve the compliance piece. So how does this really then look like in practice? I always imagine Pleo as being this cylinder that you see here. And at the base, we have our compliance company. This is where we are in control of our own risk appetite, because we are a financially licensed institute. It is where we have deep integrations into different databases for corporate documents to just allow a smooth and easy onboarding for our customers. The second layer is our payment layer. And this is really what allows us to build amazing solutions on top. And on the payment side, there are a few things where, in comparison to other companies out there, we've taken maybe a bit of a different approach, because we've gone very deep. So we are a principal member directly with MasterCard. We have deep integrations to the banking rails through our partners, JP Morgan and Danske Bank. We have a deep integration into a card payment processor called Enfuse in Finland. And these deep integrations, where we've really decided to go the extra mile instead of having 3, 4, 5 partners in between, really allows us to offer something a bit more unique and truly amazing. And then on top, as the last piece, we have our software, which is all about having the right integrations and the right solutions. So what are some of the next big things that we're looking into? We're looking into getting a credit offering out there. We're looking into building out our payment capabilities by building out internal payment platforms. And then we just want to continue to double down on the whole compliance piece and ensure that we can use that to give our customers the right experience. So thank you all for listening. I've given you a quick intro to sort of like Pleo, how we fit into the world, the journey we've been in, and how at the center of this, it's all about payments and compliance. I very much look forward to your questions and discussions following this. So thank you all for listening.
Thank you so much, Stefan, and really interesting to get an insight, especially for those in the audience who may not know Pleo. I mean, maybe starting with a bit of an unfair question, given that you are actually the head of payments, but from what I hear, it sounds like you're saying that payments is actually not the most important thing that you do in Pleo. So is it fair to say that your focus is on what happens before and after the payment rather than the payment itself?
I think in some sense, yes, but I think that's really because we see a lot of the pain surrounding payments happening either before or after the payment. I think if you go and talk to customers, they don't feel that it's so painful to use their card. They feel that it's very painful to get a card issued to their employees, getting it out there. They feel that it's a pain to make sure that all the right things are really in place, both before or after, for them to stay in control. So I think we really focus a lot on the value creation before and after, but at the center and at the core, we still have payments, because if we don't have a strong payment offering, we cannot actually solve the pains around it. I think another great example of this is sort of from the consumer side. If you look at the Danish direct debit service, betaling service, the payment and everything flows. No one is complaining about that, but everyone will complain about how terrible hard it is to set up a new direct debit agreement, right? So this is again something that's happening before the actual payment, but that's where the pain is. It's much less on the actual sort of money transaction or at the point of purchase. But you need that foundation to be able to solve the pains around it.
Okay, and with that, you also point your fingers at the incumbent services and setups. So what you are delivering, should that in fact already have been delivered by the incumbent players?
I would say yes and no. I think they could for sure have delivered it. They are greatly positioned. They have all the customers on board already. They have the payments platforms and everything in place to do it. I think in line with the conversation we've had earlier, just haven't been a core focus for them, right? Especially not on the B2B side. I think they've really focused on the consumer side, all the incumbents in the payment space with the mobile payment solutions that we have, but the B2B space have sort of been left untouched or unprioritized. And I would also say, if I was an incumbent bank, I would also not have prioritized it, right? So yes, they are greatly positioned, but yeah, they've had other stuff to do, and then we took the opportunity of solving the pain.
That seems to be the winning formula for most fintechs, to find the real problem to solve. But you're talking about making this easier and smoother and everything. But is there actually, do all companies really want to issue corporate cards as easily as possible? Hasn't there historically been some sort of control mechanism in being a bit more hesitant and making it a bit more cumbersome to spend company money?
For sure, absolutely correct. That is something that we face, or our sales team face every single day that they actually are on the phone with potential customers. I think it's good to understand why is it that this is actually the case, that companies have been hesitant. That is because you've just been handed a card, but the finance department had no way of actually monitoring or figuring out what you did. So it was like handing you a check without a value that you could just put in yourself. And I think that's where we take a very different approach. We sort of take the approach of giving the finance department control through insights. So they can actually follow real time what's going on now, compared to not giving you a card and you having to do the expenses by the end of the month. So we actually get feedback now from finance departments that we actually feel a lot more in control now, not just of the expenses, but also of our whole cash flow, because we can actually see what's going on instead of having to wait for you to do the expense report at the end of the month. So yes, like there is a bit of a hurdle, but when you sort of actually show them how it can look like, it's something that's oftenly sort of won. And that's also when we talk to customers, you can sort of see that, like, first we win the portfolio that they already have. So they might have 5 company cards out in a 50-person company, but then like by bit, that portfolio grows such that we are now getting like maybe 20, 30 cards out in a 50-person business. So we are really seeing the shift. So it's not about control, it's about like being sort of aware and being able to monitor. That is actually where the real pain lies.
Because my last question to you was actually about the Nordic trust culture that I mentioned earlier, that if that was a prerequisite, but from what I hear, that of course you need a certain degree of trust to give anybody a corporate card, but actually with the controls that you put in place, the trust is not all you need. You actually have some tools around it.
Exactly, right. I think for sure the trust piece makes it easier, but I think we see a nice pickup in Germany, which I would say from a cultural perspective is very different than the Nordics, and we see the same in Spain, where like when we get the controls in place, that whole barrier actually breaks down, and then it's much more about actually solving the real pain of the customers, and then there are a few different personas to solve for in our case. But that's what it's all about.
Okay, thank you so much, Stefan. Really, really interesting. And again, any additional questions to Stefan, just to put them in the Q&A, and we'll pick them up in the panel session. Now we've been through 3 Nordic speakers and myself, and to make sure that we are not becoming all too complacent and just patting each other's back and telling each other how great the Nordics are, we have the pleasure of welcoming Mark O'Keefe, who will zoom out a bit and talk about some best practices in digital financial services from other geographies, and then in the Q&A we will go a bit more into what the Nordics can learn from some of the observations that Mark and his company Optima Consultancy has done through their studies. So thank you, and over to you, Mark.
Good morning. My name's Mark O'Keefe from Optima Consultancy, and I want to share with you today some highlights from and lessons learned from our key market studies and mobile banking apps in the UK and Germany. Some really interesting insights we get from some of the new fintech players, but also how incumbents are rising to that challenge. So we're going to go through those table stakes. What are developing as the must-haves for 2021 and beyond? So the bar has definitely been raised. What innovation is emerging in the market? And who are the ones we think to watch? And what are the lessons learned? There's some good, bad and ugly in all this. And we'll do that through talking through some of the case studies. So our research is based on 4 or 5 years of data gathering now, about 100 UK mobile apps from 42 different providers. We're about to publish our 7th edition of the UK study. It covers both iOS and Android. And this is going through the pain of using these apps day to day, or sometimes the pleasure, depending on your view of banking apps. And as I mentioned, we're also looking at the German market as well. So we're about to publish a 3rd edition in Germany. And again, it's interesting to compare and contrast markets and different cultures. So when we start and we look at everything being data-led today, a 4-star rating is a hygiene factor. Back in 2017, Apple changed their store rating system. You could prompt for a review in app. You didn't need to leave a word review. And as a consequence of that, we saw a surge in those apps that are 4-star rated or above. If your app isn't 4 stars, you're an outlier. It's an expectation. You can drive that change. It's actually relatively easy to get a 4-star rating. You don't necessarily need a good app. You just need to be sensible about when you prompt for reviews. Is it after someone's just received an incoming payment? It's a nice time for them to be prompted for review. And you can see from this data here that when that App Store change occurred, the number of reviews that took place increased exponentially, a 75 times increase in the number of reviews. We also saw a similar view on Android as they start to make changes, and also in the pandemic, you'll see the slight increase there during the pandemic when more people have downloaded an app for the first time. It's not just about ratings, though; it's also about stability. We're testing our technical wizardry today to make sure everyone has internet connectivity. But actually, we become dependent on apps, and therefore we expect them to work. And we don't like our mobile banking app being down. And this is data from the FCA that shows the number of incidents that have been reported through to them. And again, you can see the challengers have much more stable platforms than the big incumbents who are having outages on a frequent basis. Time is money for all of us. We're very time conscious, and I think actually how long it takes to log into an app is becoming a table stake feature here. It may not sound a lot, but 8, 9, 10 seconds to wait for your app to load is actually quite significant. And we see the likes of Monzo and others who measure this and publish on a blog that actually their expectation is the app should take 2.5 seconds to load. The question is out there for those of you that run banks and run mobile apps to say, well, how long do you have as that expectation? Is it 2.5 seconds? Is it 10 seconds? Where we see the big gap and the big difference between challengers and incumbents is on money management. And that's where features exist, and this is something we'll talk about today in the panel discussion as well. Money management is really the hotspot for where we see a big difference. And those table stakes are growing. You can see here the examples of the key features covered by more than 2/3 of the players in the market. What we're seeing is things like subscription management, better money management tools becoming table stake features. This is what customers come to expect from managing their money. Every provider is missing some of the table stake features that we track, but actually the gap has relatively been maintained between challengers and incumbents. So they have a richer feature set, and they're also maintaining that functionality gap as they release more features. There is a big disparity, as you'd imagine. We've got the likes of Revolut and others have a whopping 78 features, and then some of the incumbents at the bottom there as few as 18, quite a sort of a weak app in terms of functionality, some basic things you'd expect to be able to do. And the COVID-19 has simply accelerated the digital trend we saw anyway. So you can look at all the bank results that come out, whether it's HSBC showing actually branches no longer drive their sales, they're doing those through the digital channels. People aren't visiting branches, people are using tools like chatbots and so now to interact with customers, to do customer service. And actually, again, we've done experiments to say, well, can you do something quite simply? If you've got a question, can the app answer that for you? Whether that's searching the FAQs, whether that's getting through to a chatbot, whether it's getting live chat or making a telephone call. And again, we can see the more nuanced questions, actually, can I add other accounts? Can I use open banking? And you can see the likes of Revolut and the challengers are quite good and effective at using data to serve and answer the customer. Others actually are forcing you to the website, even when actually they've got the functionality you're asking about in the app itself. So someone like First Direct, a great example, they offer digital check imaging. You ask it, how do I pay in a check? And actually they're not able to point you at the functionality they've got in the app. So some of this is basics as well. The pace of change is brutal. So we're seeing this also getting reported by incumbents who are saying they're trying to speed up. They're struggling with that, and that's a real challenge there, I think, between the new guys on the block who've got stuff built in the cloud on daily, hourly release schedules, who are able to release twice a week or faster in terms of new app updates, whereas some of the incumbents are releasing once a month. In the pandemic, some have upped their game, so you can see the average number of features added since the pandemic started in that first 6 months, and some of the established players did up their game. They had to. There was no choice but to serve customers digitally, and actually they managed to bridge a little bit of that gap. Some of them not so much. And actually Tesco at the bottom there, you can see who've subsequently announced they're closing their current account business. Kind of no surprise that the customers aren't enjoying the app. They're not using it on an everyday basis because that bar's been raised. And so we saw that sort of increase in features and the COVID table stakes, if you like. So if I want to be able to do things in the app, make everyday servicing conversations or make everyday changes, we saw some of those gaps get plugged over the last 6 months or so. So some of the big incumbents have managed to fill gaps that you might have argued are basic, but actually COVID's helped them up their game in that respect. Despite different markets, there are lots of similarities. So we look at the UK and we might say that's very different from the Nordics, or it's very different from Germany, but actually we see some of that key functionality is the same, and we contrast some of the table stakes in the UK. And so, who do 2/3 of the markets, what features do 2/3 of the markets support? And a lot of those are carried forward in Germany. But it also gives us sight to say, well, actually, what do we expect to happen in Germany? If people are putting in card controls, or they're putting in Apple Pay and Google Pay support, do we see that move into other markets? So we see certain European markets lead the way and others follow. And we see similar challenges for incumbents. So again, if you look at selected feature support here, the incumbent banks in Germany have lots of the white space, lots of the gaps in feature and functionality. And this is the real challenge out there for incumbents as well. How do they continue to fill those gaps but continue to innovate? Is it about partnering with other third parties that can perhaps offer money management tools? Perhaps they're the ones that can offer bill subscription services. So I think this is the real sort of backdrop and landscape that we'll be talking about today in the panel discussion about what is the future, how are these mobile apps going to change. So with that, happy to move forward for any questions.
Thank you so much, Mark, and absolutely, I have some questions for you, and so does our attendees. And on that note, apologies. I can see that there were some of the questions that I haven't picked up. I will make sure that all of the great questions that have been posed will be picked up in the panel discussion. But first, my first question to you, Mark. You, as an outside observer of these services coming out of the Nordics, we've heard from the likes of BillKill, Northmill, and Pleo. How do they fit into the overall landscape that you've made a living out of monitoring?
It's a great question. I think it was Helen that said it, that if you look at who's setting the expectation or where is the bar being set, actually it's social media. Actually, it's a shopping app. It's not necessarily banking and financial services. So I think if we think about how we're presenting information in Instagram and its stories and cards and its visual, this is where our expectations are getting set as a consumer. How quickly does an app load? We also get inspiration from a good banking app or a good financial app. But I think actually as a consumer, especially the youngsters that are growing up with digital services, are seeing an expectation from a non-financial player. And I think that's the real challenge for all of us out there is who is setting the standard.
And when you look at the examples at hand and other Nordic case examples, how do they perform, or how would you rank them in terms of the other services that you assess?
Yeah, so I think BillKill's a great example of if we think about living a subscription society now, well, we've got lots of bills to pay. It's not like we grew up maybe 20 or 30 years ago. So we've got lots of things to manage. That's a great example of how can we keep track? How can we prompt a customer? I think it's fascinating when we look at actually the regulation's an interesting one. So where's the regulator helping? So if you look at buy now, pay later, and that's exploding because actually consumers like that idea of simplicity. They like that idea of little segmented payments. Well, actually, where the regulator's done very well in Sweden, for example, is saying actually we need to protect the consumer. So I'm going to dictate the order something's presented for payment. So again, I think we can get good examples of positive action where we've got the right consumer protection, we've got the right intelligence and customization and personalization, and I think that's a key element that will be a standard going forward.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that this increased specialization that you also mentioned, and this much more fine-grained services, is that a general and global trend, and will we just see a continuous proliferation of financial services apps and solutions going forward?
Yeah, I think customization and personalization is going to be key, and there's a couple of things here. You can look at this battle for super apps, and is it PayPal that's going to own that space? Is it someone like Klarna? So will commerce, which is being driven now, it doesn't matter whether you're going to collect something from a store, but you might have started the payment process online. So what's that digital payment experience? So will it be I gravitate to a shopping app, and that's how I'm going to start my money management, if you like. And we can see Klarna also bring a card in after it and a money management tool afterwards. But I think what we're seeing in some of the apps now is this ability to customize your home screen. So actually, if you look at an incumbent's banking app, it looks the same for everybody. It's often a list of all the different accounts you have with the bank because they think you have lots of accounts with them. You have your mortgage with them, you have your loan, you have your current account. Whereas actually the reality of the modern consumer is I've got lots of choice. And I think, we mentioned about how youngsters grow up. Well, actually, maybe they're not introduced to banking services by their parents anymore. They've grown up and been introduced it by TikTok. So actually, where is that education coming? What TikTok's experience is different for every individual. The algorithm is telling you what to present to that individual. And I think that's the direction of travel. So we're seeing that now in some of the banking apps, likes of Revolut and others, are saying, well, you choose what goes on your home screen. You change the order of it. You tell us what you want to see. Tell us, is this information good? And you actually mentioned, Christian, about, would we like transactions? That's actually something that's in the transaction history of Revolut right now. Do you want to rate your transaction? Now, what are they doing with that? Is that about a broader play into loyalty and so on? Maybe. But I do think that two-way exchange of information, am I being helped and guided through my financial life? And I think that customization, personalization is critical.
Thank you so much, Mark. And I think we will close the one-on-one session now, but you will stick around now. We will bring the rest of the panel to the table. And we have been lucky enough to already hear the presentations for everybody. So I think I will invite everybody in, and we will kick off with some of the direct questions from the audience today. I would like to start by a question that has come up a couple of times in different shapes and forms, talking about digital ID and how digital ID seems to, at least for the Nordics, been a key catalyst for all of these innovative services. And I would like to direct this to you, Stefan, to start with, because there was a direct question related to ID. How do you help your clients do KYE, know your employee? So is that also piggybacking on the digital ID infrastructures available in the Nordics?
So today not. Today we sort of rely much more on sort of, let's say, a standard way of adding in users. But I think there's a lot of potential, right, in leveraging that. I think, again, it's about figuring out what is actually the true pain point here for the business in this sense. And I think that is to make sure that they know who their employees are, but it's also that the employees are the same across all the systems, right? If you work in a company today, you've likely had to give your email to 3 different departments, or like, now we are doing this new event, like, can you sign up for this? So I think the core of the problem here is much more about actually making sure that you have one unified set of information. And then in the longer term, you can of course start doing KYE if you want on your employees to make sure that you know who they are when they onboard. So I would just say that, like, the KYE should almost be part of the onboarding experience as a new employee. I think that's really where it should play in, and I think it's an obvious place to start, to be honest.
Yeah. And Helen, on the note of onboarding, as a neobank, you are out competing with the existing banks and onboarding new customers. Have the digital ID solutions in the Nordics helped you increase that onboarding success rate?
Definitely. I mean, bank ID in Sweden is something that 98% of all Swedes have. So it is something that everyone's really used to using when you log into any type of service, really, but especially toward banks. So for us, it means that when a customer onboard, they identify themselves with bank ID and fill in a KYC form. And together with that and the information that we can get from credit safe and these things to really make sure that it is you, we can issue a card instantly. So within a few seconds, a customer has an account, they have a card, and they can use it online. So that really shortens the time for a customer to become a customer right away. And if they lost their card with an incumbent bank, they're abroad, they need to use the card right away. We are a great option for that, and there's no waiting time, really.
Thank you. Sunny, there's a question related to the whole subscription economy and the buy now, pay later solutions, and the whole regulatory focus on these new services. And with your focus on the financial education and the financial zen, as you have coined it, how do you see the focus and interest from regulators in terms of protecting consumers and making consumers aware of their rights when it comes to bill payments and subscriptions?
When it comes to the subscription, is that we follow the general regulation in financial supervisory authority here, and when it comes to the invoice payments and pay later, I think that information of the consequences by using those kind of type payments is not well educated out there, and the knowledge is quite weak. The reason I'm saying this is that we see that often the pay later, buy now, pay later is leading to debt collection cases as well. And it's much easier for consumers to think that, okay, I paid just a small amount now, and actually ignoring the rest of the amount that you have to pay in the long run. So when it comes to regulation, I think that the government actually has to see more into this area, because it's not regulated good enough in consumers' perspective.
And Mark, looking at the role of these different financial services apps and the increased interaction between the app issuer or app provider, be that an incumbent bank or a fintech, do you see that these apps play a role in strengthening this dialogue towards the individual, and also what we just heard from Sunny about informing the consumer more about their individual rights given on their individual services?
Yeah, so I think when we look at the growth in buy now pay later, and it is exploding, and we see it's a really hot topic, and you're seeing, in fact, I think it was Afterpay announced this morning even that they're introducing an app, so that this blurring of physical and e-commerce as well. We've got PSD2 and open banking and open finance generally that is making the world of your finances open. So who can best help the consumer? Will that be regulator driven? We've got examples, in the UK market here, the Woolard review that's going to bring buy now, pay later under a regulatory regime. We've seen Australia, if we look broader in the globe, in terms of the regulator taking action there. So I think regulators have got a role. They're setting some expectations of the transparency that's needed or the consumer protection that's needed. But I also think providers are trying to get ahead of the curve as well. But I think the culture is an interesting aspect, because if you kind of look at approaches to things, and Bank ID is a great example. So if you've got a market where actually there's an easy way to ID a customer, the expectation is instant issuance. The expectation is I can onboard very quickly. And I think we saw an example in the UK with NatWest challenger brand Bow, which launched to great fanfare. Here's someone that spent £100 million and it failed abysmally. And part of the reason it failed is because when you looked at the onboarding process, it had the culture of the incumbent thinking, well, even though I can onboard you instantly, I'm not going to. I'm going to demand more information. So I think there's a real challenge to how you balance the culture of organization against the regulatory backdrop, against the consumer protection, and against the consumer expectations. It's not easy, but I think we find the challenges bring fresh thinking and a fresh approach to it.
And maybe just
yeah. Go ahead, Stefan,
maybe just
please.
one point on that, right? I think the onboarding is crucial, right? Because this is what will allow people to get in. And I think many people think that it's easy, but like we need to stay on top of the compliance piece. And that is why, like when I talked about Pleo, it's critical that we have the payments and the compliance piece together. And that is also why we made the investment of becoming a regulated entity in Pleo. That meant that we could actually set our own onboarding requirements, right? Because we are the sort of licensed institute. We are the one that needs to serve in front of the regulator. Whereas like many other companies go out and they have a partner, and then they're dependent on whatever requirements that partner have, whether or not it fits their business. So it's just really this like in-housing of both the payments and the compliance piece can really, really catalyze a bunch of other stuff that just eases the customer journey and for instance, the onboarding. So it's just so critical, these things in the engine room.
And it's just to jump in on that point a second, Stefan, it's interesting, isn't it? Because does a consumer want some friction? So if I'm making a £2 payment, maybe I want it to just go through instantly. If I'm making a €10,000 payment, maybe I want some elements of friction or check, or I want that reassurance. And again, that's a balancing act that organizations need to get right.
Absolutely. And just picking up on Stefan's point about licensing and being a licensed entity, Helen, when Northmill became a licensed entity and got your own banking license, how did that change your way of working? Was that sort of the transition to become a real financial player? Was it sort of a rite of passage, or is it more of a housekeeping thing?
No, definitely. I think we've been on the same type of journey as Pleo is speaking about there, where becoming a bank is really enabling us to be in the driver's seat and own our customers and be in charge of our own KYC and really setting the rules of how we want to act with our customer. So the banking license here really gave us the opportunity to offer a broader product perspective with savings as well as payments, and not having to rely on third parties that would decide on how things will be done. But together with the banking license, of course, it's not only good things or easy things. You also have to comply with a lot of regulation, and it is putting a big layer of compliance on everything that you do, which is good for the customer in terms of safety, but it also puts a lot of pressure on us as a bank that we need to have a really high standard of everything that we do.
And Sonny, from a BillKill perspective, do you see yourself becoming a regulated entity, or are you an enabler of regulated entities with the services that you provide?
We do have our own payment license today. Actually, we are regulated. We have a payment license from the Norwegian Supervisory Authority, and it requires the same strict standards for payment financial institutions as the banks today. So we have to go through the same kind of identification from our users as well. And we also have to require our users to use bank ID. Bank ID is also very popular identification here in Norway. And our users have to go through the acceptation of the PEP, PEP, and screening from the FN and the EU screening list. And the thing is that I think it's very good and is very effective that we can actually identify our users, because often all other payment obligations is connected to your ID today. So, for example, in BillKill, when you register and verify yourself with the bank ID, all your invoice information from your bank goes automatically in the app, so you don't have to do anything manually in BillKill. And we couldn't have done that if we didn't have the bank ID identification.
Thank you. Mark, if I earlier asked you the question about zooming out and looking at the Nordics and the Nordic services claim to fame. From what I hear, based on the questions and the comments here, is our biggest claim to fame almost our digital ID solutions, more than the actual services that we have invented since?
Yeah, there's probably a digital first aspect that I think the Nordics has got that gives an advantage. You might also give a disadvantage. You think, how do you serve customers at the edge of that in terms of that side? And I guess you might argue it gives the incumbents an advantage in the Nordics. So if we look at perhaps where you need to get round issues in other markets. And actually, where you perhaps don't have that ID, you don't have that ability to onboard as easily. People have had to think about alternative solutions. Well, how can I meet some of the paper challenge? Well, I can do things slightly differently. So actually, you might argue that it gives the incumbents a bit of strength, and similarly with Swish and other things, that if there's a solid, good P2P payment method there, actually, again, if you were to look in other markets, how can you pay someone simply that's not in your bank? Well, actually, you've got the ability to do that. So you might argue it kind of makes it easier for the incumbents in the Nordics. But I do think, and Sonny mentioned it, if you kind of look at the expectations that people have, that things work, or I don't need to enter information a number of times, or it remembers me. And I think that I'd almost say, we do all these app studies, and it surprises us sometimes the little things that people don't do. So when your app opens, should it open where you last were, what you were last doing? And something that you get used to when you're using Google or you're using Facebook. Facebook's for old people now, isn't it? So, I think you look at the younger, and again, you look at the younger generation that's about video content, and it's about short. Should that be, if I want to learn how to use the app, should I have some little TikTok type videos that walk me through it, or should I be going and searching FAQs? And I think that goes back to my personalization question that I mentioned in our Q&A, that if you think about the needs that a consumer has, they're very, very different. So actually, the way you probably need to serve the 70-year-old or the 60-year-old is fundamentally different to the 15-year-old. And that in itself, without rambling on, that is another important point. Actually, how is the generation discovering banking services and payment services, because they can download an app that's perhaps not a full bank account, and that's how they engage with it to start with. It's not that their parent goes with them to open a bank account. So actually they can open 3, 4, 5 things, try it out, and then decide which one they like. And so that even that discovery process is very different now.
Picking
Maybe
up on the
just one fun.
Go ahead, Stefan.
Just one fun fact on the digital ID. So in Denmark, we onboard customers using NEM ID, in Sweden Bank ID, and so forth. And when we go to Germany or Spain, where we don't have these solutions, we have to have a fallback, which is like you take a selfie and you compare it to your driver's license. And we just see a clear drop-off when comparing the two. So it just means that the sort of digital ID and this ease of identifying yourself, it just lowers the barrier to try out the new product so significantly. And we can just see it in the numbers, right? It's a double-digit difference in conversion ratios, whether you have A or B. So it is a huge enabler.
Yeah, and that's why you see some of the buy now, pay later explosion, because some of that frictionless process, and this is how we've become as consumers. Oh my God, you want me to put in my card number? No, I'll just click that button there and do it a different way. And it's, that is the nature of the instantaneous expectation we have. And we go often to the path of least resistance. And it's why you see, Google Pay and Apple Pay so strong in some of that commerce experience as well, because it's a one click, it's a Face ID or a thumbprint checkout. When we were doing the bank studies a couple of years ago, it astounded us some of the apps didn't have Touch ID. And you thought that's just a basic, and that's where I think this bar is just getting constantly raised, and in some cases, some of these incumbents are going to drown because the bar is getting to a point where they just can't compete, and it just shows up their service.
And I think on that note, it's really interesting to see as well other players trying to enter the Nordic market. It is quite a high bar to be able to offer all of these Nordic identity solutions. And if you don't have them, it's really hard to find trust from the customers. If I'm only entering my ID and using a PIN code that is 4 digits, is this really a trusted bank? I think that's where a lot of players that are trying to enter the Nordics are experiencing problems. And in the different way for us, we're so used to having a simple onboarding process, it will be difficult to look into other European markets and see how we can create that frictionless experience there as well.
Yeah, Helen, that's a great point. If I can just quickly jump in on one. Sorry, Kristin. We found that N26 is a great example of a bank that's gone very European and now got US ambitions. And it's important to understand some of those cultural differences and understand some of those landscape differences. So when N26 came to the UK and their exit was blamed on Brexit, even though they came knowing that vote was already there. But when to activate your N26 account your card in the UK, they said go to a cash machine and withdraw cash. Now that's fine in Germany, where it was quite a cash-dominated society. But you've opened a digital account here, you've been given a card, and you're told to go and make a cash withdrawal. That's very anti-British culture in terms of the cash usage. So I think there's also an element of understanding your market. So you might think you've got the right tools for your market, but you go to the Nordics, and as Helen said, if you can't do the things that are expected there, you're not going to succeed.
I mean, asking somebody in the Nordics to go to an ATM, I mean, you might as well ask us to send a fax. It's just so ancient history. But talking about the trends, there's a lot of talk about embedded finance and also things like unified commerce and invisible payments. All of these, maybe to a degree, buzzwords, but still, based on all of your presentations, you hear that things become more and more seamless, more and more well integrated. So Sunny, how do we ensure that the education and understanding of the consumers are probably handled as financial services do become more and more invisible?
Like I said before, I think that coming generation has more access, like broader learning and more variety as the information is available digitally. And then we already see that, for example, in Oslo, we do have preschools that they're teaching just from the iPads, all subjects. And we also see that the results is quite unique because they actually learn just, playing the numbers and trying and exercising digitally. And the learning curve is quite more effective than what we had when we grew up as well. So my thinking is that during these financial and payment changes we are experiencing, and the consumers today, their behavior and their habits is changing. They're quite expecting a different things than what we used to do. I think the next generations is actually adopting and feels like natural for them. There would not be some kind of abroad where they have to change something, but there is everyday life for next generation.
And Helen from North, yeah, exactly. I was about to address the same to you, basically.
I think from us, it's also really hard to see that the next generation will have the same type of concept of money that we have today. I mean, when the payments become that frictionless that you go into a store and you don't even have to pay because the store knows who you are, they know what you bought. I think we're going to face a challenge where people are lacking the understanding of value of money and what that really means. So it puts a lot higher pressure on us as fintechs to be able to educate and also to give more advice and kind of hold the hand of the customers in a much more narrow way than we've done before. So I think it's going to be really, really tough.
Yeah, and Stefan, when issuing corporate cards to this new generation that we just hear may not have the same concept of money and do not worry about where they spend their money. Do you see a role for a company like you to also do financial education for corporate spending?
Yeah, for sure. I think like if you just look at what some of our most requested features, it's like how can I easily communicate expense guidelines to my employees, right? Because like I want to monitor and make sure in the finance department that I'm in control, but I also want you to know what do we in company X believe is a fair amount to pay for flights. Like, are you gonna stay at the Ritz or the Scandic or the cabin, right? And I think that is another piece where we just need to enhance our communication and sort of get that out there. I think our goal in some sense is to actually not have people write out those things, right? Because we actually see what is it that your peers are buying. We see if the finance department have questions about that hotel night. So we actually want to just build that up and offer our customers, this is what other people in your company are sort of booking in when they go to Berlin or Stockholm, right? And that is the other piece of the financial education, which is then a bit more like company specific or organizational specific.
Okay, so as an employee, I can see that. Okay, I'm too modest when I go out dining, so I need to step it up a bit to keep up with the habits of my colleagues.
Yeah, like for instance, that could be one, right? I think the other piece that we actually see is when you give people the freedom to spend at times without having like it has to be this amount, they actually spend a bit less than what they normally do, right? So if I say just go out and pay for dinner, like then you feel a bit more like this is your own money that you're spending, even though it's the company. So you're actually a bit less like you're a bit less high flying in some sense, right? And I think it's some of the same things that came out of all the stuff in Netflix. If you go read the topics and the books on that.
We are shortly running out of time, but we have still room for more questions. Also, if you have more questions from the audience, we can surely pick some up after this Q&A and panel discussion. There is also an option on the platform to socialize to meet the other participants. But let's finish off with a couple of questions here. Today's focus has been on the Nordics, and one question that I've raised in different shapes and formats a couple of times now, but I would like to return to it, is what can the rest of the world, or the rest of the fintech world at least, learn from the Nordics based on what we have seen today? Maybe Mark, as the one non-Nordic participant, you can have a stab at that once again.
Yeah, so I guess I missed the chance to plug my daughter's junior mobile banking app review. So she's really interested in what Dad does for a living. She's 10 years old, and she's grown up with some of the pocket money cards now, and we see that trend happening in terms of especially the fintechs looking to monetize by saying, let's offer a junior account, let's engage earlier. And I suppose in a way, if I look at the Nordics, which is sort of, you might argue, all the generations are digitally native. So maybe actually some of what other markets can learn from the Nordics is what needs to be in place to serve everyone that's digitally native. And actually, if you think about all the generations growing up around the world are growing up digitally native. So actually, probably some of the lessons that people could learn is, well, okay, what does the Nordics do well, or what's it had to have? And you know, ID is a good one in terms of how can you effectively ID a customer? Do you need good P2P interoperability for that to work? So they're probably two of the things that I would take away as an outsider there. But I wouldn't underestimate the pace of change. And I think if you look across, and you know, COVID's done that for sure. But I think the pace of change that's going on in financial services globally, it doesn't really matter whether we're talking about the Nordics or the UK or anywhere else. Actually, the bar is just getting raised, you know, from so many different dimensions that you cannot rest on your laurels. You've got to keep moving, keep innovating, and not be afraid to throw away a solution. So if a better solution comes along than Bank ID or Swish, you need to think about adopting it. Maybe it's WhatsApp payments, maybe it's, you know, whatever that is. I think it's not thinking that you've succeeded in terms of where you are.
And yeah, I for one agree that complacency is the biggest risk here. But yeah, Helen.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting also on that note to see how how people are changing and becoming more disloyal towards banks. Incumbents are used to you getting your bank account when you're a kid, and I still have the same one that I got the first time that I got a bank account. And I think that's the common behavior for everyone in the Nordics. But now when we have smoother onboardings and other fintech players that are niche players, it means that we will have multiple financial services and really cherry pick who's best at savings, who's best at payments. So it will be really interesting to see when we have all of these niche players, how can the customers drive change also in rebundling and getting like one overview of your finances. And that's where PS2 and these type of services will really accelerate the experience within banking.
Yeah, Helen, staying with you, I would like to ask the question: when you go out to conquer the world, what will you take with you, being the Nordic element in your recipe for success?
I think for us, we've always been really close to the customer, regardless of who they are, and that's what we want to bring to Europe as well when we go into multiple countries, is how we can continue to stay close to the customer problems in that country and be humble to that they're not always the same as they are here. Like we talked about Germany shortly, that they're still cash heavy. So then we would need to adopt our offering if that's a market we wanted to enter, and similar if we want to enter other European markets. But we always will bring our apps and that type of experience when it comes to UX and UI, and all of the backend support that we have of being fully cloud-based and having all of the support of Visa and Marqeta to go into countries faster.
And Stefan, basically the same question to you. Will you be bringing? Is it the Danish design that is the killer feature that you will use for world domination, or is there other Nordic elements to as part of your recipe for success?
I think like the first one is echoing what Helen said, right? Like being close to the customer and their actual problems and being humble about that. I think no matter where you go, that is what you need. I think the other piece that we will for sure bring with us is this in-housing we've done of payments and compliance. That is really like a key thing for us in order to be able to offer their solutions to our customers of the standard that we require. I think that is one we will sort of take with us wherever we go, if that's in Europe or beyond Europe.
And finally, you, Sunny, the solutions that you bring to the table. I mean, bills are being paid everywhere in the world. Do you see that your solution can be used everywhere in the world, and is there something that you can, a Nordic element you can put into it that will make it successful or more successful in the rest of the world?
Yeah, we are a niche. We have focused on invoice payment there, and we also see that culture, customer behavior, habits, and bank and finance infrastructure is quite different from country to country. At the moment, we are in process of launching in Sweden actually, and even though Sweden and Norway is like neighbor countries are quite similar in the customer behavior, the infrastructure actually is quite different when it comes to the foundation of the banks. And that is a small challenge comparing to the rest of the world. So I also agree that we need to be humble. We need to adopt the culture in that country we are launching, and we have to consider like technical, culture, and customer behavior when we are launching in other countries.
Thank you. Even though we are almost out of time, I think the question that just came up in the Q&A merits that we carve out a little quick round as well. The whole shift from open banking to open data as such, I think it's quite relevant as a wrap-up question, because you have all touched upon the value of data. And you also already mentioned PSD2 and the open banking development. Maybe Helen, starting with you, as the question was actually directed to you. How do you foresee the shift in services as we move towards open data rather than just open banking?
I think this is a really interesting shift because I'm not really sure it's driven by the customers. It's more driven from regulations and the fintechs and banks wanting to have more data from each other. So I think with open banking and open data, it's more taking a step back and looking actually what do the customers want from this? What is really relevant for them to see, and do they really want to share their data with all of these players and be able to be more open toward what is shared between services and build different products on that is focused from real customer problems. So it will be hard. I don't know if there's anything out there that's yet launched that is really out of a customer problem. It's more from bank's perspective so far.
Thank you. Does any of the rest of you have any perspectives on the open data question that we just had here?
I can jump in for a little bit. Sorry, go on, I'll let you go, Stefan.
Yeah, no, I think like from our perspective in Pleo, we have a very clear sort of design principle that like whenever we ask for data, we need to be able to tell the customer what do they get in return. right? So let's say we ask you for something like be that AML question for our compliance. We need to clearly explain why is this. And I think it will go the same way when we start talking about open data and data sharing between financial institutions. We as the fintechs or the banks need to be very, very clear in articulating what is it that you get as the customer. Like you get easier onboarding, for instance, or whatever it might be, but that it needs to go hand in hand. We cannot just like ask and aggregate data. We always need to sort of tell the customer, this is why we are doing it, this is why we are asking you for this, and this is what you get in return.
Thank you.
Just
Mark?
to jump in.
Yeah,
I was going to say, I think, we've been talking about kind of where the Nordics is leading. You can look at where in open banking the UK has been leading, because the Competition and Markets Authority made the big banks pay to develop the standards. So took a bit more regulator led. So we've got lots of live use cases. So I know it can be easier for me to use a third party to move money around than it can be to do it in the own incumbent bank's app. I think the interesting thing that I would leave people with as a thought process is, if we look at something like Buy Now, Pay Later and Klarna and others, and the fact that they're going to need to use open banking data to do the credit scoring because society's changed with the way we consume stuff, actually, they can then use that access to make payments easier. They can use that access to collect the money. So suddenly, we say, well, people are used to using direct debits or they're used to using regular payments. Well, now they might use something different because they onboarded in a very easy way and they gave that access, and now they can manage their money in that way. So I think the use cases will evolve, but I think to Helen's point, I think the consumers will drive those, and they need to see the value rather than the banks pushing an alternative set of rails. So I think open banking, open data is kind of a watch this space, I think.
Mm-hmm. And Sunny, a final question here on that note. You already talked about more intelligent use of data, so credit scoring based on people, if people actually pay their bills, rather than credit scoring based on where you live. Is open data, is that a trend that will pave the way for more intelligent use of data?
At the moment, BillKill is not part of open banking. We do have our own payment license that is not required PPT and open banking. We actually connected to the same platform as with the banks and not to the banks. So it means that we own our own data and customer behavior as well, and we do not share with any third parties at the moment, but we use it to actually upgrade our own features in the app. And we also use it to help the customer to document their own payment behaviors. As I said before, it's quite different. One thing is that all quantitative data you can find in the register, but your actual behavior today is not registered anywhere. So by doing that, I think the credit score and credit assessment in the future, the consumer behavior and habits will play a greater role in the future when it comes to their behavior and credit scoring.
Thank you. I, for one, would love to continue this dialogue because there are so many great insights to be had. But unfortunately, we are well over the time we had planned on spending. But that was only because you all provided such excellent insights. So thank you so much, Sunny. Thank you so much, Helen, Stefan, and Mark. Really, really valuable insights. I, for one, enjoyed it, and I hope that all of the listeners and viewers did as well. And thank you to Marqeta for making this event possible. I hope you've all enjoyed this session. There is still room to follow up on the platform if anybody wants to reach out to me or to somebody else. And with that, I wish you all a great day and good luck in all of your endeavors. I will be watching each and every one of you. I promise you that. And I hope that our viewers will as well. So with that in mind, thank you.